In today's episode, I sit down with William Branch to ask him why he engages in white evangelical spaces. He's going to talk to us about indigenous instincts, social divisions, relational disconnection, and how living in the worlds of hip hop and Bible college shape his conviction to stay. Welcome to a podcast about disciple making in the public square, where we talk about everyday issues from a biblical and balanced perspective. This is where life exists. This is Where Life Exists, where we talk about everyday issues from a biblical and balanced perspective. My name is Dahadi Lewis. I'm the lead pastor of Blueprint Church and the vice president of the Sin Network. And I am here with Dr., Professor, Mentor, Brother, William Branch. William Branch. And we're speaking that thing into existence. So
Yes,
we
let's
are,
do that.
I am all in and I'm excited to be with you today, man. I've been doing this kind of series. It's after the election, all the stuff, and we're talking about why I stay. Why do you stay? Why we stay? And that is really, just talking to minorities, specifically African Americans, because right now it is not vogue to be a minority in these circles, right? And specifically white evangelical spaces. So I've been talking to a few different people. I've shared a few articles, and we are here with you today to ask you these questions. And so let me just why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about your ministry and really your call to minister in white evangelical spaces, or even how you got involved in ministering in white evangelical spaces.
All right. Well, let me just say that I feel called to minority spaces, especially with an urban emphasis. However, what Providence has done is it's often caused me to wind up in white evangelical spaces. Providence has often got me in these white evangelical spaces, unbeknownst and unplanned by me. It seems like Providence led me there because I developed this hunger, and God just sort of took me to these spaces, and I saw the benefits there for the sake of what I ultimately wanted to do. And it just so happens that that's become a recurring pattern, that God linked me up to show me how I could merge the impulses that seem to be in both spaces. Both spaces have benefit, and both spaces have these areas of emphasis and these impulses that when you bring them together, and if you get grace to sort of see these like excel and see these things come together, you have to see that, man, this is good for that space and these things are good for this space. So that's originally how I got in white evangelical space. I went to a Bible college, and I went to a Bible college unbeknownst to, I didn't know it as a white evangelical space. I just knew it as an opportunity to go to college. My father sent me there. He wanted me to get a Bible grounding. That's where he sent me. It was there that I realized that Jesus Christ could unify you with anybody whose heart is stayed on him. It just so happens that as I started gaining things and taking it back, I went back, to my spaces, so to speak, and they started getting rocked off of the treasures I had. Like, we don't have what you have. I said, wow. That's what they said when I came there. Because when I went to the white evangelical space, they say, man, you're like really black. Like, we don't have that here. So everywhere I've gone, the treasures that are abundant in one space has been appreciated by the other space. So I got on this reoccurring path. And then I started becoming really adamant. I want to model this fusion. Wherever I go, I want to model it and I want to excel in it. And that's sort of how I got here. And God keeps bringing me back here. And I'm praying that it's for the ultimate goal of, again, the context that we often talk about, where both treasures can be modeled, where you'll see both.
Yeah, that's what's up, man. You talked about you keep coming back to this, right?
Okay.
And there was a conscious effort and a conscious decision that when you made that decision, whether it's joining a seminary, right? I mean, because at that point, like you said earlier on in Bible college, you did not know, but you are now at Southeastern, you are
Right.
in Virginia, you're in North Carolina, and it's kind of like you made a conscious decision, to kind of continue engage in
Right.
that.
Right.
Take us on that journey there, of how that
Yeah.
happened.
Okay, so why was Joseph in Egypt, right? So there's the human element and there's the divine element.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just keep it real. I got in this time out of a rejection by my own space.
Hmm.
So I'm just gonna keep it real.
Yeah.
I was literally waiting, looking at my own space, like I'm committed here, because I had bounced several times.
Yeah.
I went to Philadelphia College of Bible. Something happened there. Went to Philly. I went to Lancaster, which is outside of Philly, and then something happened. Went to Dallas, where I was in a primarily a black context, but the seminary was a primarily white evangelical space. Then went back to Philly on church planting, and then something went down there, and I literally was sort of like was rejected there, and I was looking around like, hey, like, but I'm here though. Like, there's no other place to go. I'm here. And through a number of events, God brought me to Southeastern by invitation. Almost like when Paul was like, we tried to go to Mysia, we tried to go here, we tried to go there, and the Spirit of God said no. But then we got a call from the man from Macedonia saying, come here. So we concluded that God had called us to preach. I concluded that God wanted me here because an invitation came. Why don't you come here? You can further your education by getting a doctorate. You can further your education and even begin to heal by just like learning a new tribe and just making community here. So that's how I came. Now it became intentional because I have no aversion to the white evangelical space. Like, there's no impediment for me. I don't have to hop anything to come here. I've long since learned that this space has much to offer. I do feel craft. I say I'm cut from a cloth and I'm carved for a context. Paul said there's a grace on me to be a minister to the Gentiles. So that's what he did. I feel I'm meant for an urban space. I'm meant for, again, a majority minority space where the minorities are the majority. But my coming here is intentional now because wherever I go, I want the best of these worlds for the place that I'm going to be serving. And I believe that's how I got here. God used what happened to thrust me here. And then when I got here, I said, good, I need more tools. I need wider relationships. And I need, again, a healing that at the time I was looking for. And I found it here. And again, I'm going to continue to excel.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good word. When you talk about this idea of Paul to the Gentiles, Peter to the Jews, there is a call. But what we also recognize that in the scriptures, when Paul would go into a place like Thessalonica, and he said he would first place he would go would be to the synagogue. You know, so
Absolutely.
even though he was going to Gentile land,
Absolutely.
he would always go to the Gentiles. How
Absolutely.
do you measure that tension of being called, you know, to a certain context? You said cut from a certain cloth, but finding yourself kind of ministering in a multi-ethnic dynamic or even a white dynamic.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. I think we all drift toward our more indigenous instincts, and I do. Everywhere I've gone, I've always had my context in the midst of that context, my indigenous context in the midst. So if you were to come to my house, you would often see, again, minorities in the home, Black people in particular in my home. Everywhere I've ever gone, we get it in. So we're not non-existent, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that is that, like I said, I'm from someplace and I'm to someplace. So mine is, I think Paul's was really theological. He said, I'm obligated to all, to the Jew first, then for the Gentile, and I think for me, I'm cut for the indigenous and I'm for the indigenous context. However, it's come to be broadened and I sense a grace to excel in both spaces. So for me, it's more of it's the way I am. It's now instinct now. It's just how I maneuver. And because I've found grace and I excel wherever I am by the grace of God, I'm always comfortable. Now, I'm getting restless, and sometimes I'm like, okay, Lord, when will I, like, I don't have to break fellowship or relationship to be dispatched into a different context.
Right.
And I think that's the issue.
No, that's good. First of all, was when you was that the shimmy? Was you shimmying?
Yep.
Was restless
I don't know
like
if it was a shimmy, but if it shimmied,
okay, I just did that. So So tell me, like, what's the most challenging about trying to navigate these spaces?
Yeah.
Like, what is most challenging about that, your journey?
Well, I guess the current climate, there is a disruption. There's a division. So originally, first of all, this is the first time I've lived in a white space that's in the South. So that's different for me. All my life, 40 years before I came to the South, South white has been a little different than Northern white, at least in my experience. And for the first time, even my Christian people who used to be as like to me as ambidextrous as as it seems like we kind of are, like, man, no matter what space, because of the gospel, I don't care if I'm in the white space or I'm in the black space, my gospel commitments had like allows me to experience love and embrace and like there used to be no issue. I had very little issue all my life. Um, in this current climate, Trayvon Martin forward, a lot of people use Trayvon Martin as the time when the black started like developing like an antsiness that led to a black exodus from these spaces. I think it's the fact that when you look around, some of your own people now question your motives for why you're there when they've always not only acknowledged that it was God, but they've benefited from it because it was God. Now they're acting like calling it into question as though you're just here for some earthly motivation, not by some divine maneuvering. I'm like, we've always been where we are because of the Lord. Like you're not, me and my man Tonic, we say, you're not going to out black me. Like you can't out black me. Somebody tweeted one time, if you're not in the serving the African diaspora and you in the white space, I ain't feeling you. I'm saying, now, first of all, that's not Christian. Second of all, don't try to play me, because they were really subtweeting me. I said, don't try to play me. Like, you're not going to out black me. You're not going to tell me because I'm in a white evangelical learning institution, gainfully employed, working on education, but still committed, like I've always been, to the gamut. Don't try to play me like that. This is the difficulty today. Yeah. I don't have the problem. I'm not running into problems with the whites. I'm running into problem with my brethren, according to the flesh, who act like they don't know that God has many times allowed cupbearers to the king to still have a commitment to Jerusalem as though it were. I got this cupbearer's job outside of where my people are, but my eye is always on my people, and I'm faithful to that too. So it's primarily that. But then I think there is a sense in which there's a new crop that's come out, a new white evangelical I had never met before. Very hostile, very ignorant of black culture over at large, and very ignorant to black Christian culture, very aggravated and agitated by some of the black because we're missing each other, because either our gospel language or our gospel focus has been obscured by our political interests or our social desires and needs. For the first time, we're more divided by how we disagree socially than we are unified by how we agree theologically. And so now we're asking, do we really agree theologically? Because we sure can't see it if you look at how we live socially. This is the first time there's been a sustained disruption between those two things among blacks and whites who had Jesus in common. So that's become difficult for me.
So people talk about disruption, and I think some of the people are saying like it's good. It's a healthy disruption in the sense of kind of prophetic, and really for the first time, minorities and specifically blacks are speaking to the nationalism that has syncretized itself in American evangelicalism. So what would you say to what you see as the inflexibility that you spoke to, and how do you navigate that, when you see kind of this inflexibility or this hostility specifically towards kind of, what has been coming out as like, whether it be there's the different things, wokeness and all of the things that is, it seems like there's a hostility on all sides, on both sides, that it seems that forces us to have to choose. I mean, so what are your thoughts to that?
Mm-hmm. Just for clarity, I'm speaking to the inflexibility on all sides, or the ones that
specifically talking about the disruption. So the inflexibility right now, because you kind of spoke it onto the black side.
Okay, right.
The inflexibility to kind of the syncretism of nationalism and all those things,
Oh,
and
right,
this and that,
right.
because you talk about there's a disruption, and it's like, but I would say, yeah, it's a healthy disruption. It's kind of like the
Right,
modern day prophet speaking to something that is not theologically aligned with the scriptures.
right. Yeah. So this is a moment. Like, so sometimes I think people thought they could sort of let this moment go by, and whatever, like a normalcy would come back, without recognizing that we're going to have to contend with a new normal. There's a new normal that we're going to have to get ready for, that's being forged right now. And so, yeah, this disruption, again, like I said, it's new to me. It's new to me. For the first time, I came to a place. So, like, I'm from a place where you respect Republicans and Democrats because everyone, sort of like Augustine said, like, they have this natural tendency to seek their self-interest. Everyone sort of seeks their self-interest. That's both individually and collectively. And so I've never seen somebody try to disqualify somebody, either from like church embrace or just speaking kindly or speaking well of them because they are a Democrat or Republican. This is the first time, and it's primarily because I'm around people who would call themselves the right or conservatives, and liberal is a dirty word, and the left is an insult. So I'm like, but I'm so used to like being impressed with people who are on the right, on the left. I didn't have that kind of mindset. So the disruption for me has been in like not like almost having to plead with both sides that they're very fine people on both sides to leverage that crazy statement out of context. Like, don't we know that in God's house, there are people who socially arrive at different like passions and longings, but who theologically are affirming the unifying truths of Jesus? Like you said, this is a disruption that seems like it's more than just flesh and blood. You know, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against behind the scene actors, principalities, authorities, darkness. You know, there's God working something. There's the behind the scenes Satan and his henchmen working something, and then there's the human players. And so I guess I'm agreeing with you that this is a healthy disruption, and I'm starting to see America is actually doing what America should do, and that is continuing to progress to become something it purports to be. Yeah. It has never been or fully realized what it purported to be. And the crazy thing is, Blacks have always been able to participate from their vantage point in America becoming what it purports to be. Blacks were at the forefront. They were not exclusive, but they played a very strategic role during the civil rights movement of bringing America to where it purports to be. And now Blacks, again, I wish the church Blacks were more involved, were more in the forefront, but right now, Blacks, again, are playing a very pivotal role in America becoming what it purports to be. And so I think we as Christians really need to work this out, because we've got to be involved. We can't be fighting each other while the world is actually doing something that you said that's good. It's actually a good thing, because we're shaping something that should be, and it seems like it's requiring fire. It's requiring heat.
Mm-hmm. Final two questions. Can you differentiate for me what you would consider good disruption and not healthy disruption? Disruption that is just not healthy at all. So differentiate that. And then the last question is, why do you stay? Why do you stay?
Good disruption from bad. Well, I believe bad disruption is relational disconnection, not just philosophical differing, relational disconnection. It's, you know what, brother? I just believe philosophically we see it differently. So you're still my man. I still speak kindly to you. I speak kindly of you. When I'm in town, we still getting together. We're doing whatever we're doing, so long as our schedules permits it. Like, I'm careful about who will talk about you. Sometimes people will say, I'll talk about him, but you can't, like, that's my man. You can't talk about him like that. I do it. Like, we have this thing in love. I just think we're talking about each other and each other's sides with such a disdain that we feel injured relationally by one another, not just differing philosophically. I believe that when Paul and Barnabas separated, it wasn't a relational disconnection, even if they were kind of salty at the time. You see Paul talking favorably about Barnabas, and you see eventually Paul saying, hey, John Mark, bring him. He's good for ministry. He was able to acknowledge that John Mark is good money, even after he didn't want him to go on the missionary journey. I'm seeing too much irreconcilable differences. I'm seeing people not reconcile. And then breaking fellowship with people who have fellowship with people they don't want to fellowship with. So it's like, but I never did anything to you. Oh, I'm too close to him, so now you don't have anything to do with me. So I see too much disconnection relationally, and almost no reconciliation. That's unhealthy disruption. I think disruption, that agitation that comes from reminding people that it's never been easy, both in this country, and it's never been easy in church history. It took Peter, like God had to give him a vision on a roof, drop a sheet down and say, eat food you're not used to eating, to jar him to be able to embrace a people he had never really embraced, go into their house. He said, it's not right for a Jew to come into a house with a Gentile and eat like this. He was saying, this isn't normal. God had to do something abnormal to get me to wake up. And he still didn't get it. He repped there, and then by the time we get to Galatians, he's backsliding. So in other words, we should expect that it's going to be trouble trying to break the cycle and move forward. That's the good disruption.
That's good. What's
bad is I don't mess with you anymore. And year 1, year 2, year 3, now all of a sudden there's hardly any we. We've talked about this. Where's our we? Mm-hmm. We don't even have a we anymore. The we is earthly rather than gospel-driven heavenly. But then why do I stay? Again, I have no impediment to the staying. As long as God is present and as long as he has his people there to minister, I'm good, because God has blessed me and graced me to be able to find an oasis even in wilderness times. I stay also because I become convinced I am a product of the two worlds working together. I'm a product. Hip hop raised me, and Bible college was one of the things that gave me something that hip hop began to praise me for. They said, we feel nourished by you because you have not only what we have, but you have something else. And God, by his grace, gave me that when I went to these little spots where he sent me to places that are different. It's almost like Joseph being able to say to his family, hey, don't worry. I know y'all did me dirty. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good so that I could be a means of salvation. You see, so I'm able to take care of my family because of my Egyptian exile. I'm like, I'm able to do for the people I really hope to do something for because of these moments where I go into these spaces that are not indigenous to me culturally, but they've been indigenous to me theologically. So I stay because I still believe that these worlds are meant to be one in Christ. His great plan was to tear down walls so that the multiplicity and the multi-ethnicity rallied around one God and one faith and one Lord, one faith, one baptism, is the way he shows off we have something the world doesn't have. So I keep doing it, and I know that by his grace, I'll keep doing it. I'm not saying there won't come a time when God will, ekbalo, right? Your word, throw me out. But right now, he's holding me fast.
Man, that's good stuff. Again, we are here with Dr., Professor, mentor, brother, theologian, rapper, husband, father, William Branch, my man. And this is Where Life Exists, where we talk about everyday issues from a biblical and balanced perspective. Thanks for watching another episode of Where Life Exists. This has been a part of our Why I Stay series. We love to hear what you think about this video. Leave a comment below to let us know what your thoughts are and questions on today's topics. And if you want to stay up to date with the latest videos and interviews, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.